Right, everyone, welcome to this week's Researchbites. We've got Jasmine Campbell with us, who I met some years ago now, I think. So that's all I'll say. I'll let Jasmine introduce herself, and she doesn't have to say where we met or anything. It was on some course in Manchester, I think. Yeah, over to you, Jasmine, if you can introduce yourself, and then we'll have a chat.
So thank you very much for having me. And yeah, it was many years ago we met. But yeah, as Russ said, my name's Jasmine and I'm a sports nutritionist. So I'm based in the UK, and I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years now. And I chose to do an undergraduate and a master's in sports science. And I had a few years of sort of finding my way, doing random bits of work experience and other jobs, and then I focused more on sports nutrition. And when I was at a place of work, I was really enjoying it, so I decided to continue studying sports nutrition specifically. And since then I've been working self-employed, and mainly working in football academy and first team. And at the moment I'm currently working football, swimming, and I'm a tutor on a postgraduate diploma in sports nutrition as well, amongst other little projects. And I started my professional doctorate about a year ago as well, so I'm looking forward to sort of getting that project really going too.
Great stuff. I'm trying to think where to start and what to ask you about now. I think, can you tell us actually a little bit more about your professional doctorate? Because I think people will be quite excited about that, and then we'll get into sort of the main body of the chat.
Yeah, I think I always felt like, even though I've got 2 postgraduates, very different to doing something like a PhD. I found I always thought, do I need to get a PhD? What would it offer me? And I think because I really enjoy being a practitioner, the research side didn't really interest me very much. Obviously, I read research all the time, and sometimes I have frustrations where I think, oh, I want to know the answer to this question I've got in my practice. I want to I'm working with a new sport, so I want to understand the performance requirements more and what I should be recommending nutrition wise. So I'd always go and look at the research, but more times now I'm finding, oh, I can't find the answer to my question. I'm having to guess or use research and, from maybe another sport, or try and sort of piece together find the missing pieces. And then I think, that I want to continue to, progress as a practitioner. So I thought, at the moment with my work, I couldn't afford to maybe take 3 years out to do a conventional PhD. And I have no idea what specific topic. And when I was looking at topics that are advertised, I was thinking maybe, but I've always had quite diverse work and I enjoy the diversity. So I've been on the look for something. So I've doing the professional doctorate, which is same level of education as a PhD, but it's a different way of doing it. So I still have to do 4 studies, but it's much more applied. So it's more about, as being a practitioner, answering the questions that you've got within the industry, and then doing some studies to investigate those answers, and then some studies demonstrating how you have applied your findings. So maybe a little bit more case study work and things like that. And it's very reflective as well throughout. So it's thinking about how can you develop yourself as a person. So it's no discredit. It's very different to doing a PhD. Maybe potentially challenges you slightly in different ways, but it was something that I could integrate with my work rather than stopping my work to do a PhD. So yeah, and that's at Liverpool John Moores University in the UK.
So fantastic sports nutrition department to be doing that in. On that, just that idea of reflection, so before we do eventually start with some proper questions, how important is that to your practice. So you've gone through multiple qualifications. You've got your D-Prof now, which is very reflective in and of itself. Have you used reflective practice a lot in your practice? Has it been of use? Yeah.
I think definitely in the beginning, I used to think, I mean, when, because both me and yourself I didn't actually finish doing it, but doing what's a BASES accreditation. So I did some of the courses for it. So that's the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science. So accreditation process for that. And one of the courses was on reflective practice. And I just didn't really value it because I'd never done it before. And I felt like in the session it was quite airy fairy, and I was a bit like, well, of course I reflect on things all the time, like, I didn't really understand or see the value of doing it formally, but definitely it's something that I have been using, and it's really nice to do. And I think if you definitely read about it, and for me, I think because I was introduced to it more formally, actually you'll find your own way of doing it regularly. So I definitely do it more informally. So it's always in the car ride home, I sort of really have a good think, and that's simplifying it. Or I do a little bit of a journal that I just keep writing my thoughts down, my reflections, so that it could be a 5-minute or 10-minute job. It doesn't need to be half an hour or something, which I think when you're first introduced to it, sometimes in an academic setting, you think, oh, this is another task that I've got to do every day, reflect on my interactions with my colleagues, the athletes I'm working with. But I think it's something that's really important. And if you've not heard of it before, I think I kind of simplify it is, you never lose, you always learn. So it's very good for young practitioners, especially who, you're going to make mistakes, and that's absolutely fine. Sometimes it could cost some people quite a lot. But when you're continually reflecting, thinking about, right, what did I do today? What did I do well? Why did I do those things well? What's happened previously? What things didn't go well? Or, why did my colleague misunderstand me? Or, why did that athlete not take me up on that, or what have you? It's, a really good process in making you be more conscious about what you're doing and why, and maybe learning from those experiences more.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I remember being in probably a similar position. We sort of started at the same time, didn't we? And you just got to fail fast, fail frequently, but importantly, sort of fail forwards, I think, and sort of learning from that so you can keep growing or improving what you're doing and the quality of what you're doing is pretty important. Have you got any sort of big failures or anything that you would, for say some of our students who are maybe thinking about starting their own business post-graduation, what were the big things you failed on?
I think when you say big things, for me, sometimes they actually feel like a big thing, but really they're not. They're all like little things that maybe you could do better, or you slightly misunderstood something. So maybe one was I got the opportunity to do a lot of educational sessions with an academy of football. So boys football academy, from under 9s, under 10s, under 11s, under 12s, all the way through to under 18s. And I think, I just thought, oh, I'll just do a stand-up session where I deliver it to each of those age groups, and I'll use slides and I'll present it to them. Whereas, okay, fine, everyone would have said the first session went really well, so much so that they let me come back and do another one. And I felt like it was quite a big achievement to do that at the time. But then I soon sort of quickly thinking back on those sessions and running it past colleagues and maybe my peer group and stuff like that, it was like, yeah, that probably wasn't the best thing to do. And why would you stand and do a lecture to 9-year-olds, 8-year-olds, And these are boys that can't sit still for 2 minutes, and they've been at school all day and they just want to go and play football. and it was very basic nutrition, but it was like, did I relate it enough to football? Probably not. So yeah, I think actually now I would never ever dream of doing a session like that. I feel like there's so many things wrong with it, and nobody had a problem with me doing it, but that probably felt like quite a big failure. But I can't really see how I would have done it differently with that knowledge and experience I had at the time. So it definitely feels like a big failure, but actually it now has made, that going through that process means that I do things very differently now. I don't know if that's a good example or not.
No, that's cool. I think that's perfect. Because that really speaks to, maybe I think when you come out of having done your degree, particularly in maybe slightly larger institutes than Wintec, for instance, where you maybe have been assessed doing things like presentations or exams or whatever, and you've sort of learned in a particular style, you maybe think, oh, that's just the way we carry it forwards into practice. What sort of sources of inspiration then were there for you to, as well as what you've just said, who do you look to, or how did you start to change your practice?
I think something that will relate back to the point I've just made, or that example I've given you, is that I never ever enjoyed speaking in front of people. That was my idea, my worst nightmare. And even if, say, at uni I got the chance, you could do a presentation or you could do this, I would definitely not choose a presentation. And I would pair myself with someone who was really good at public speaking or who enjoyed it. So I think in my head, I decided that when I go self-employed, because I saw a lot of, especially social media is really useful at seeing what other people get up to. Obviously, it's a very edited view of what they do, but I would see people doing workshops and lectures and talks and things like that. I was very much like, I'm going to be a sports nutritionist, but I'm not going to do any public speaking, and I'm not going to stand up in front of anyone because I don't enjoy it. And I think I can be a good sports nutritionist without doing it. So I just thought I'd be doing lots of one-to-one stuff. And then I'm not really sure what, maybe because when you start out, you're not really getting much money. And I was thinking, well, it's quite time consuming. And then there were roles and opportunities like the Football Academy where it was like, well, we can give you this work, but don't speak to under 14s one-to-one. We do education sessions. It's more suitable for them at this age. And, we don't have the resources to pay for that sort of support. So I was kind of like forced into it. So maybe that's why sometimes some of my first talks, workshops, lectures, I maybe look back and I'm a bit horrified, but actually at the time it was so overwhelming standing up in front of people that I kind of needed to get that out of the way first. Whereas now I'm much more confident and I don't really get as nervous. And I actually quite enjoy public speaking, weirdly. I just would never have thought I would. But so I think that's it was good that I was pushed to do that. And that was probably from a business point of view, like that I was going to really limit myself as a sports nutritionist. And now I found something that I really enjoy doing. So.
Cool. No, that's great. I think, thanks very much for acknowledging that. And it's great to hear that sort of transformation, I think, over the course of your last couple of years of practice. It's really exciting and really encouraging, I think, for a lot of our students who maybe are in a similar position to yourself, where public speaking maybe isn't the best thing. But it's maybe just it's a tool in the toolbox, isn't it? Which is the classic phrase of a previous sort of and current employer of yours, Lauren. So you mentioned social media. How important is it for emerging practitioners and people trying to build a business to have a presence on social media? And then how much attention do you actually give to your social media content?
I think that's a really good point, very topical as well, because for me, I think social media sometimes can be a really big distraction, and can be a massive resource, drain your time a lot. So it is constantly about, sometimes I have to sort of pull it in and realize how much time I might spend on it and things like that, or if it's actually useful, be very conscious about what I share online as well. But for, I guess, the reasons why I've enjoyed using it previously is, I think when you go from being in your cohort at uni to suddenly all going back home and being spread out again, obviously it's a really great way of keeping in touch. And then if you are trying to sort of develop your practice, two reasons, maybe one, the people who want to work with you, like the athletes, it's a very good way of them sort of checking you out first. So with for example, I'll never forget, I went and met a boxer that I was going to work with, and I went with his entourage, met them, and I just thought it was going to be a bit of a informal sort of interview chat. And the boxer didn't really ask me anything about my work experience, my qualifications, anything, and neither did really his team. And then he sort of halfway through the chat went, "What's your Instagram?" And he had his phone out the whole chat, and I went, "My Instagram." And he's like, "Yeah, what's your Instagram?" And so I told him, and then he sort of just basically checked out of the conversation, was scrolling like this, and then and then he was like, and his sort of manager was like, "Listen, are you listening? So what, anyway, we'll call you, we're going to have a chat now, we're going to call you." And he was like, "No, it's all right, I'm going to work with her. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll sort it out then. Yeah, we can start now. What do you need off me? We'll sort it out now." And so he sort of checked out the conversation for a good 10 minutes. Then he decided, above his manager and other stuff, that he was going to work with me right then on the spot, and they wanted to have a conversation about it. And it was a way of him sort of going through, and this is, your social media is obviously very edited, but I chose to sort of have a profile that was maybe a bit of my personal life, but showcasing what I do work-wise. And I think maybe my values as a practitioner do show through, and how much I care about people I work with and what have you. But he obviously looked through my profile and decided that I would be somebody that I don't know if he could relate to me through it, or he could see that I'd had success with other people. I'm not sure, but I used to sort of think quite carefully about what I was going to post all the time. There are some things I probably choose not to post on social media, but I definitely find it's a very good way of showing that you do relate to other people. And it's very good for maintaining sort of relationships as well. Like, for example, we probably can't speak very much at all, but we can sort of keep a tab on what's going on and check in with each other every now and then. It's so good when you are starting out, in the sense that you can see what other people are up to, get a bit of a nosy, and you can maybe aspire to have a go at what other people are doing, get some advice of good things, maybe see what not to do, or the bad content that's out there. And it's really nice just to have people that you can network with and talk, whereas especially now with the pandemic, I can't go to a conference and catch up with my peer group. I can catch up with them through social media. But I think important things is that always ask permission if you're going to post pictures about people you're working with. Sometimes it's really not okay to just be on your phone taking pictures. I've definitely seen younger practitioners doing that. You obviously, you're working there to support the athlete and your colleagues. You're not there to get content for your social media. So I see a little bit of that sometimes. But it can be a really good tool as long as you're not on it too much.
Sorry, I was just doing some washing up in the background here. You mentioned, as part of that, sort of putting your values out there. how do you project those values as a practitioner?
I don't know. I think, for example, I've always valued family massively. And actually, it's, again, when you're viewing an athlete, you have to always remember they're a human being first. And definitely as a practitioner, especially nutrition, I guess the first thing is maybe do no harm. Obviously, you don't want to harm them, so it's better sometimes to do nothing than do something and cause harm. The second would be to improve health. And then the third would be to improve performance. And sometimes just making an athlete healthier is going to improve their performance anyway. And I think in terms of values, you're always sort of viewing them as a human being. And a lot of athletes I work with really value maybe their family too. So I think if they see that you value family too, they can instantly relate to that. As well as maybe sometimes people see you as a nutritionist, and I cannot tell you how many times I've met people for the first time and they think, oh, female sports nutritionist, and they go, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Are you a vegan? Straight away. So they always, and I am quite a big meat eater, so that always makes me laugh because I love steak. But of course, I'm really happy to work with, someone, whatever their views are, if they want to be vegan or vegetarian, I absolutely support that. And I am conscious about how much meat I eat, but it always makes me laugh that people assume that. And I think people also assume that you're there as a food police. So it's very important that I show people that actually I'm really passionate about food as well. So probably two things: showing that I can be relatable as another human being. I enjoy life. I love my dog as well. That's always had a lot of relation with that. And that, I love food. I love eating food that's healthy. I love food that people would deem as bad food as well. So there's a lot of, I also love sports nutrition. So I think if those things show through, I feel like there's somebody's going to relate to at least one of those. So
Cool. No, that's I think that's, I'd like to think very similar values to myself, and that's probably why we get along so well. And I think particularly around that passion for food generally, I do think it's maybe increasingly difficult to be a sports nutrition practitioner and not really care about food, or not be able to sort of conduct yourself in a kitchen in a certain way. That maybe all started when sort of Team Sky got chefs, and it all became very just a cool thing to do, I think, to be a performance chef and all that. Do you find part of your role is getting athletes excited about food? And if so, do you find some athletes just don't engage with food, just see it as a means to an end, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because something that I've learned from working with a range of individuals is that, especially if you work in team sport where you've got one sport, they're all male, they're all female, they're maybe 20 years to 30 years old, you expect them kind of all to be very similar, and actually they're wildly different. So my favorite question to ask people, and this sort of, I like getting this in early, especially if I'm doing sort of one-to-one, is do you live to eat? Okay, so do you love going out to, restaurants? Do you love do you love your food? Is it you look forward to your dinner, what have you? Or do you eat to live? So you only eat when you're hungry. You're quite happy eating a cheese sandwich every lunch. You probably eat the same breakfast every day. You're not really that fussed about what your dinner's going to be, as long as, you like it and it's going to fill you up. So once you know that, that can really help with how your approach is. So and actually I've had people who have been very much, eat to live, and I've seen a change in them when we've maybe forced them to do a cooking workshop or something. But I think it's really important to get people excited about it, because if you've got an athlete who can only cook 3 dishes that their parents taught them, they sort of put on a cycle at uni, that's going to limit their food intake, and they might get bored of it, and etc. So if you can really expand the range of what they do, then great. The other thing as well is that there's a little bit of a culture in, say, in England with or UK with maybe male footballers, not being very domestic. So can't cook. Either their mum cooked for them. It's a women's role, very old school. That's not the case in all of it, but there is still that underlying. So it's a women's job. Mum's always cooked for them, and then when they've left their mum, their girlfriend cooks for them. So for me, obviously got some fantastic female chefs that I've worked with, but having a male chef or male chefs in the kitchen at the training ground has a lot of value. Male chefs teaching the players to cook has a lot of value as well, I think, and getting them, really excited. And we've done things where we've bought a pasta sauce from a shop in a jar, ready made, and then we've got players to make a pasta sauce because they use tomato pasta sauce all the time, and then get them to like taste the difference and appreciate that there's really specific steps that have quite a big impact on the final product, and they might never make that pasta sauce again, but it's unbelievable how excited they get, and how, and then they want to make it for their girlfriend and their family, and it's some things you think, oh, we'll do this because I see value in it, and then we actually go through the motions. We're like, wow, I'm really pleased we did this.
Cool. That's I think the word that would maybe sum that up is sort of this idea of empowering athletes, isn't it? And giving them the tools to make better decisions, or to have sort of better diets and things. How much of, if we think maybe more about sort of private clients, how much of a role does just understanding the person and then empowering them to be better, whatever that means? Have you got any tips and tricks, or how do you like to go about doing that?
I think it is very goal orientated and thinking about their lifestyle. So I think I'm naturally quite an empathetic person. However, it's a little bit difficult when somebody wants you to be their nutritionist. Normally they are happy to pay to have someone to be accountable for. So really, some of the things I get them to do, I know I'm talking to them, I know they know to maybe do some little things, like they know they're eating too much carbohydrate on their more or their least active days. They know that already, and they're like, yeah, I know. But they want to hear it from me. They want someone to send, I don't know, their weights to, or someone to measure their body comp, even though maybe they're not an elite athlete. They just want someone to be accountable to, and have someone telling them what to do. So they might have small children, they might have a very demanding full-time job, and they're training as much as maybe just a bit short of what a normal athlete would, or an elite athlete. You've got to realise that sometimes their priorities are going to be swayed, and that they're not always going to be able to do everything sort of 100%. So being empathetic, but then also being firm as well. I guess so, understanding that their priorities might change, and that you've got to be able to give them coping mechanisms for when, their life really.
I think that's certainly something we've come to understand a bit more in the last couple of years, and something I've tried to maybe put into my teaching a bit more, that athletes, regardless of where they sit on the spectrum between very recreational and elite, like they all have lives around sport. And it's I wonder if we maybe need to do a better job of letting people know that sooner rather than later, and just maybe being not necessarily slightly more accommodating as practitioners, but just being aware of that fact is, do you think it leads to more successful outcomes?
Absolutely. So just maybe I'm talking about, elite athletes just being single young people. Absolutely not. They might be doing their studies, they might have other responsibilities. And then you've got lots of professional athletes who've got small children, or, parents that rely on them, and partners at work as well. So I think being aware of them, yes, because you could be there sort of banging the drum, for example, about yeah, you should be getting this much sleep, and you should be doing you should be eating this for dinner. Whereas actually, if you've got an athlete who's got a family who their favorite thing as a family is to eat their favorite family meal on a Saturday night together, that's kind of like a bit of a tradition for them, or a Sunday roast, and you're there like, no, and you're like, it's really important you sleep, but actually they've got a newborn baby and two smaller children. It's like, they're probably looking at you afterwards being like, I know what I need to do, and she's telling me I need to do all these things, but she's got no idea what my life is like. Or you're taking something that could add a lot of value in another way, like that traditional family meal, whereas you could do stuff to accommodate around that. So I think, people want to be able to see that you really care about them. So if you make it your mission to be aware of all those little details and things, your intervention is going to be a lot more impactful, because that, one, they can actually happen, and two, they're going to carry on doing them because they do, they fit in with their life a lot more.
On a similar note, so earlier you mentioned being vegan, or not in your case. Something that's, I guess, increasingly discussed within New Zealand society is acknowledging people's culture and people's cultural heritage, and maybe how that influences not just, say, their food, but, as we've just spoken about, does that mean getting together as a family on a Saturday or Friday night or whatever? Have you got any, I don't really want to just say examples, but have you got any sort of war stories of how you've maybe successfully or unsuccessfully tried to factor in someone's culture, or what they consider a cultural element in relation to food at all?
Yeah, I guess there's lots of different ones with that, in terms of yeah, it's, you've got to account for it, and I think maybe sometimes, younger practitioners see it as something quite gimmicky. Maybe if you're talking about Ramadan, for example, it's all like, it's all like, we've got to, if we've got a Muslim athlete, I'm going to solve all their problems, I'm going to tell them, what they can eat so they can still maintain performance, still recover, they're going to reduce the amount of, say, dehydration they're going to experience, etc. Whereas actually, if you've not grown up in that culture, with that religion, and those, maybe those things that they've done from a young age, you've got to be really aware, are you being patronizing? For example, in the UK, with sports, like, nothing happens on Christmas Day. Whereas with our Muslim athletes, we might expect them to perform around what's quite a holy time for them. So that's their religious holiday. That's, something that they look forward to all year. So you've got to be really conscious about what you're talking about. And actually, if you learn about the meal where they, or how they break their fast, and then the meal before they fast again, actually, when you look at the traditional foods that they like to consume and drinks, they're actually already doing a lot of what we would, the types of food and stuff, they're doing already a lot of that as well. Another cultural example, well, the experience that I've had is, maybe again a mistake that I've made, is I was working with very strange projects. We had a group of Saudi Taekwondo athletes come to the UK for a year, and I was their nutritionist while they were here. And obviously, maybe you only ever get to see what that country's culture is like based on how news is reported to your country, for example. and the people who were setting up the program were like, great, you're going to be the nutritionist, they're all male athletes, etc. And I was like really excited to do it. And then when I was talking to like my family and friends, they were like, are they going to mind that you're female, and are you going to be able to measure their body composition, and are you going to be able to talk to them without somebody else in the room? And they're really, really worried for me. And then I was speaking to friends who are Muslim, trying to work out because they were going to be here over Ramadan and things like that. And then they were also going back to Saudi for periods of time. So I was really conscious about, I wanted them to be able to maintain some of the things we'd set up for them in the UK, but back at home. And I think one of the maybe mistakes I made was that in the UK, we gave them food on a plate, and we used to do a lot of like pie charting the plate out, so you knew how much protein, how much carbs and veg to eat, and making weight sports. So sometimes it's quite crucial we got that really right. And then what I just didn't understand is that when they went back to Saudi and they were going to see all their friends and family for dinners, is that they ate a lot of meals where the food sort of piled up in the middle of the table, and then they take handfuls from it. So I was like, right, making sure they got all their information and being like, right, when you go and take food, make your plate like we do in the UK, what we do here and what have you. And they were like, yeah. And they said, yes, yeah. Okay, fine. And then with social media, I was seeing pictures of them sort of feasting like this. And then when I spoke to one of the older ones whose English is really good, he was saying, it's like, no, we just don't eat like that. But they very politely let me believe that was what was going to happen. And I very naively thought, yeah, but that's because it's a very big cultural difference to not maybe have that plate and just eat with your hands from a big communal plate. So I think it's one of those things where you think you know lots about the culture already because you've been working with athletes from it for, but it's always being aware that it might be something you're missing because you just weren't brought up in that culture.
Cool. You've got to have that sort of humility, I guess, as a practitioner, haven't you? That, as you said, you're always learning and trying to apply what you've learned to practice and apply it subsequently, I think. So we've sort of circled quite back nicely to that idea of a professional doctorate and a reflective practice again, which is cool. I think we'll make this final question. So this is obviously going to go out to our students, normally at sort of postgrad level, and some of our staff who teach across a range of levels. And some of our courses are geared towards individuals who will be working in small businesses or starting their own businesses. Can I just get a couple of sort of, if people are hesitant about doing it, would you say do it? And then last sort of top 3 tips for being a successful new practitioner.
Yeah, I guess for me, what the transition I made to being self-employed was, as you know, Russ, I was working for a sports nutritionist who had his own performance lab, and that facility closed. So it was kind of forced my hand into being self-employed. And for me, it was just something I never even thought of doing. I always thought I was going to be employed by a club or a team or by a national governing body. That's how I just saw my future. But actually, just doing the work myself and finding my own employment and clients was actually the way to go, because sport, there are just so few jobs. I think for me it was about speaking to as many people who had done it already, and then just doing your research. It is possible, people do it all the time, so don't let that be a barrier. It can sometimes feel like there's just a lot to get your head around, especially if you've just finished your degree and you're choosing to maybe set up your own business and stuff. And I think you might see a lot of things. I remember when I first started thinking, what do I need to do? I need to have a website. And then I was speaking to some friends who had a physio business, and they'd just spent $2,500 on their website. And I was thinking, I haven't got any money. How am I going to afford a website like that? And I would see people who start working, get loads of business cards and get clothing with brands on and stuff. And actually, I think there's a lot of stuff you can do that can distract you in the early stages and cost you a lot of money. Really, you should look to obviously spend as little money as possible and wait and see. So I chose to use something like Squarespace for my website, just so I had a profile online. It was a cheap one that I could looked professional, but I could edit as I wanted, because I didn't definitely know how I wanted it to look for the long term. So rather than, you know, someone building me a website for £2,000, I could do my own one for 140 a year sort of thing. And yeah, I think just being, you know, adaptable as well. But at the same time, I guess maybe this is my second recommendation. It might be different, you know. Sorry, to go back to that first one as well, I had a lot of family who were like, oh, you're gonna have a clinic, you're gonna rent a room to see your clients and stuff. Whereas when I was looking at the overhead for that, I was like, well, I don't really have a lot of clients yet. So I was doing a lot of going to people's home or workplace, or somewhere mutual, or going to their training ground or whatever to meet them. That was cheaper than me renting somewhere that wasn't guaranteed for people to come to. And actually, I don't think half of the people that I work with would take the journey away from where they train and live, etc. to you know, it's quite a big time commitment for them to come out and see me where I live, for example. So sometimes you've got to go to them. Yeah, and then I think what my second one was going to be, I guess setting boundaries as well. So you kind of have to always, and I think this is what works sometimes quite well for a young person who's just finished their degrees, that maybe you have got that time and that enthusiasm to, you know, say yes to everything and what have you, but then you've got to be quite quick, and I definitely wasn't at setting those boundaries when things do start picking up for you. So making sure there's a difference between work and home life, and that you're not working all hours doing sort of maybe not your best work, for example, as well, because you're sort of so keen to keep progressing to earn enough money and, you know, get new jobs and stuff. So that'd be my second one. Set some boundaries once you get up and running. Yeah, and then I don't know, I guess my third one as well would be, I think, especially I'm sure everyone's experienced with the pandemic, the uncertainty. That's something that really has always bothered me, is not being able to maybe see what the next 2 years of my life is going to look like. And then after sort of maybe 10 years, I'm kind of getting used to the fact, oh yeah, okay, I guess this is quite a personal one for me, but there is uncertainty, and see that as a positive, because you just never know what's going to come up, what opportunity. And if you keep making those connections and networking, and people are seeing what you're doing, people will want to help you. And yeah, just try and not worry about what might or might not happen. Just try and be present in what you're doing at the time and enjoy it, I think, too.
Cool. That, yeah, couldn't have put it any better. That's fantastic. So yeah, I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. If people want to sort of follow your practice or get in touch or anything, can you sort of, being respectful of your keep personal stuff personal kind of thing, where can people get in touch with you or follow you or keep up to date with Jasmine?
Yeah, so on my social media, my Twitter or Instagram, my handle is my surname, which is Campbell, CAMPBELL, Jazz, JAS. And then my email is jasminecampbell@mac.com. And that's Jasmine with an S and an E.
Great stuff. Right. Well, yeah, thank you very much again for giving up some of your Friday for this. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure our staff and students will get an awful lot from it, particularly the last sort of bit of the chat. I think that was really honest, and I really appreciate that.
No, thank you for having me.